Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about pensions. Now, there's a lot of different kind of pensions at all different levels because there's all different levels of government. I want to focus specifically on county pensions, not necessarily state pensions or city pensions or teachers' pensions or any of that. Let me ask you a question real quick. Who's doing the slides? How many of you are willing to guarantee that the stock market is going to go up? If you're willing to guarantee that the stock market is going to go up, just raise your hand. Nobody is willing. I must be asking the wrong question. You got a slide. Let me do it a different way. How many of you are not willing to guarantee that the stock market is going to go up this year? Almost everybody. Look at that. Suckers. Guess what? You already guarantee that the stock market is going to go up because your county, Tarrant County, has a defined benefit pension that guarantees that all the people that are beneficiaries of the pension, the employees, are going to receive a 7% return on their investments, on their pension, every year, no matter what goes on with the stock market. You guys guarantee that the stock market is going to go up. Congratulations. I'm going to put another slide up. It's going to scare some people. Please don't get the vapors. Don't run out of the room. But this is about math. Some people are not so comfortable with math, but math is really what it's all about. You start with money at the beginning, you put money into an account, you take it out at the end. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between. That's all the math part. The other reason that you need to know that this is about math is because when you go out and talk to your neighbors and your friends and your representatives and your council people and your county judge, etc., about this, what you're going to get back is a lot of emotional appeal. You're going to get, it's not fair to take the pension away. Well, yes, it is. Because a pension is not a guaranteed contract. It's a public policy decision that was made by people a long time ago. And it's not guaranteed. We can make the decision to change the pension if we want to. And so that's what we're going to talk about doing. Okay, so this slide really just gets into what we're talking about. There's two kinds of pensions, essentially. There's a defined benefits pension, which is where the employer, the county, and the employee both put money into an account. It builds up over the year. The employer or the county keeps it. And then at the end, you get a check once you retire every month for the rest of your life. It's the classic old-style pension. The defined contribution plan is a 401k or a 457, which is just part of the IRS code. You don't need to know the numbers, for public employees. And that's where you put money in, usually the employer puts money in, and you keep the money. It belongs to you. If you change jobs, the money goes with you. Interestingly, in a defined benefits plan, which is what we have, you put money in, and the county puts money in, and the county's actually sort of counting on taking that money from more than half, almost 2/3, of the county employees and not giving it to them. Why? Because that's what the turnover ratio is. If you have 100 county employees, usually 60 or 70 of them leave, and all the money that they put in stays behind. So the county and their advisors are actually counting on stealing 7% of the payroll for all of their employees and keeping it and giving it to somebody else. That's not really a fair system. So when you get those emotional appeals and people say, well, it isn't fair to take the pension, well, you're already taking people's money. Why not go ahead and put it into a defined contribution plan where the people that put it in get to take it with them? TCDRS is the Texas County and District Retirement System. That's who we're going to be talking about. They were founded or put together, chartered in 1967. Think for a second about who was in charge of Texas politics in 1967. It was a Democrat state, Democrat governor, Democrat legislature, Democrat senate. So this is a Democrat plan, and it's been in place ever since 1967. And you'll see that when I start talking about some of the provisions, because they're very one-sided. The last point here is that there's no mechanism for getting out. This is kind of a throw me in the briar patch kind of plan. There's nothing that says a county has to participate in the TCDRS plan. However, once you get in, state law does not allow you to get out. So you're forced to stay in this plan. Every county in Texas, except for two, kind of up in the panhandle, are participants in this plan. Okay, county pensions are in addition to Social Security. So when people say, well, they need to have some sort of retirement, well, they do. They're like all of us. They have Social Security that they contribute to, which is a defined benefits plan, by the way. Interestingly, the TCDRS plan sort of figures on paying about 70% of the pre-retirement salary if you stay in for 25 years. So you're getting Social Security and this pension, you're going to make more in retirement than you make by working. Is that the right kind of incentive plan we want to have? I don't think it really is. The most important thing on this, if you can see it in the green, is that the people who decide how much you put in, how much each county puts into this plan, that's TCDRS. And it's in their sole discretion how much you contribute. So the county doesn't really have a lot of flexibility. There are some things which we'll talk about that they can change, but all the big decisions and the big drivers are made by other people, not by your representatives. Okay, next page. 7% return, regardless of the actual investment performance. So when I said you're guaranteeing the stock market performance, this is what I'm talking about. TCDRS, bless their hearts, guarantees that they'll make 8%. The actual average return for their portfolio over the last 10 years has been only 6.2%. So they are not performing up to what they think they should. They're not even performing to the lower standard that the state mandates. These guys really are very good at what they're doing. But they don't want to lower that assumption, because if they do, then that will mean the counties have to put in more money. And the county commissioners and the county judges are resistant to that because it eats up more of their budget. Next up. That's kind of self-explanatory. I found this in an analysis that was done on pensions by the Manhattan Institute for Public Policy. What they're doing and how they're running the pension now with a guaranteed 8% return, Bernie Madoff went to jail for less. It's a pyramid scheme, plain and simple. Next page. So the employees put in 7%. These are the characteristics of the plan that Tarrant County has. The county promises that when they retire, all the money that they put in from the time they started work until the time they leave the county's employ and go to retirement, that the county will put up 200% of what they put into the plan. Tarrant County has a cost of living adjustment on top of that, so that every year the pension goes up by 80% of CPI, or the inflation, basically. You don't have to provide a COLA, but Tarrant County does. Dallas County does not, interestingly enough. Next page. The pension plan that Tarrant County provides to its employees is roughly 3 times as generous as the average private sector pension. A Pew study done in 2010 says that the average private pension pays about $7,600 a year. The average public pension pays about $17,600 a year. Tarrant County, $22,000 a year. That's the average that they pay. Also, they're 80% funded, the Tarrant County plan, which is kind of the threshold for what people who are in the industry say is sustainable. If you slip below that, then you're generally regarded as, your pension is generally regarded as not being in very good shape. Here's some statistics on what Tarrant County has done. The important ones I've tried to put in bold, so you can just kind of see that from 2006 through 2012, the contribution as a percentage of payroll has gone from about 10.7% to almost 14%. I can tell you right now that TCDRS in August made a presentation to the the Tarrant County Commissioners Court that said that they expect that number is going to go up every year for the next 6 years in a row until it hits 17% of payroll. And then it will stay at that high level for a further 10 years. So you, as a taxpayer in Tarrant County, are looking at having more money go into the pension for the next 16 years in a row because they've got a defined benefits plan. UAAL, that's basically the difference between, that's the unfunded amount. They have X amount of liabilities. You compare that to the assets, and the difference between the two is the gap. You can see that that's gone from 83 million to 166 million over that time, so it's doubled. That number is using some very hopeful, optimistic sort of assumptions. It's very much understated by a factor of 5 or maybe 10 if you use more realistic assumptions, but I would use, as a CFO, more conservative assumptions. So there's a $166 million liability out there for Tarrant County. Below that, you can see we've got number of members, essentially employees, has stayed pretty flat over that period. But you see that the number of retirees has gone up by about a third. So that means that the number of employees per retiree has dropped from almost 4 down to about 3.2. So there's just not as many people working to support each pensioner as there used to be. That number is going to continue on the same trend too. It's the same problem that Social Security has, essentially. Okay, so why is this important? That's just a few of the things that we're going to talk about. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to kind of skip forward pretty quick. Basically, there are a lot of other people that are in trouble with this issue. It varies from East Coast to West Coast, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the people that got into trouble. The pension problems crowd out other programs. This is the biggest problem with it. If tax rates stay the same and revenue for the county stays the same, if you have to pay more of the money towards pensions, then you're going to have less money for parks, for road repair, for all the other sort of things that you want the county to do. And that's the biggest issue. Okay, next slide. As I said, TCDRS doesn't have a lot of flexibility, or the county doesn't have a lot of flexibility in the TCDRS plan. The manager of TCDRS has actually come out and said that these kind of plans tend to have abrupt changes, and we'll see that. Like I said, you go to 17%. And the shrinking tax base, if you have that, which we had a few years ago, really exacerbates the problem. And that's another issue in these plans, is that all the things that you would traditionally try to change, like holding down payroll, reducing employees, things like that, actually make the problem worse. So it's just a bad plan, and it's a bad structure. Skip that. This is just kind of an example of how the numbers work. If you have 500 employees making $30,000, that's a $15 million payroll, so 10% of that goes to pensions, let's say that's $1.5 million. If you cut your staff, then the amount of payroll you have goes down, but the amount you can contribute goes down as well. If you raise staff, conversely, you have more money to pay, but you also create a lot more in terms of your long-term liabilities. So there's really just no good way out of this box. I don't know if any of you have met the treasurer for Tarrant County. I have not. I've met the Dallas County treasurer and a couple of others. Nice guys, or gals in some cases, but they don't really have the expertise to evaluate the investments that this plan makes. And they don't do it. They don't review the performance, and they don't even look at it. The county commissioners, I've seen, if you go online for Tarrant County, they've got a lot of video of all of their meetings. And you can go and watch it, and TCDRS comes every year, and they do a little dog and pony show where they mostly don't actually talk about the relevant facts. And the county commissioners just sit there. They don't ask many questions. So they don't really care. They're not paying attention to this because nobody is bothering them about it. None of you guys are calling up and saying, hey, we want you to get rid of this plan. If you did that, they'd actually say, well, we can't. And that would be right, which is why I'm going to talk to you about how you can actually affect change by talking to your state representative. That's who needs to make the changes. The forecasts that TCDRS has made have traditionally been wrong. The big reason that you have one of these kind of plans is for stability. That's what they tell you. Well, it's a stable plan. Well, stable for who? It's stable for the employees because they know they're going to get that regular check when they retire. It's sure not stable for you, the taxpayers. Not at all. There's no responsibility for TCDRS if they make a mistake. If their returns are low, like they are for the past 10 years, there's no downside to them. They don't get penalized in any way for the poor performance. All they do is they come to the county commissioners courts and they say, you guys are going to have to kick in a little more next year. Sorry. Get it from the taxpayers. And if they do really well, then the fees they charge are based on the assets they have, and so they just collect more fees. So, it really doesn't affect them if they do poorly. It affects you guys. This is kind of some technical stuff. We talked about it a little bit. There's been a study. Milliman is an actuarial firm that actually is the consultants to both the county and to TCDRS. And they've come out and said that if you cut your rate from 7%, which is the mandated return that the state has, down to 6%, it doubles the liabilities. And that $166 million shortfall that the county has that I told you about, that's not the liabilities, that's the gap. If you double the liability, which is the big number, it's going to make that 166 grow by 5 times, maybe more. And that's if you adjust the rate. GASB is the Government Accounting Standard Board. If there's any finance guys in here, it's the government equivalent of the Financial Accounting Standard Board, which public companies have to go by. They're trying to fix a couple of the problems in the accounting, and there's some new rules that are coming out in a couple of years that will fix a lot of the things that I'm talking about. That's the good news. The bad news is that Texas state law doesn't require them to actually abide by GASB. They can ignore the rules and make up their own rules if they want to. So even though they're going to change them, they may not actually reflect those changes, reflect the changes that GASB makes, which is sort of an independent standard setter. Those may not be reflected in the reporting that the state pension people provide. How much do we owe? For the whole state, TCDRS says that they're $2.4 billion short. That's for all the counties and all the other entities for whom they manage pension funds. Tarrant County represents about 7% of that. The number for Tarrant County is a little bit larger than the one for Dallas County. Even though Dallas County is a little bigger and has more employees, and that's because Dallas County does not provide a cost of living adjustment, Tarrant County does. Another group at Stanford University, the Stanford Institute for Policy Research, says that the accounting that they're using, the thing that GASB is trying to fix, would also double liabilities. So one study says that the liabilities will double because the investment return is too low. Another study says the liabilities will double because the accounting is wrong. So if you put those together, it could quadruple the liabilities. And that's why we're so much underfunded. So that $2.4 billion could easily be $12 billion or more. Okay, a little bit about TCDRS. Their total assets are $19 billion. Remember, under conservative assumptions, they could have a $12 billion gap, which means their funded ratio would only be 37% and not the 88.8% that they claim. Remember, Tarrant County is 80%, which means Tarrant County, compared to all the other folks that are in this, is actually a worse plan, or it's less well-funded than the average county plan in Texas. Their investments are shown here a little bit, $2.5 billion in next slide. In 7 junk bonds, and you can kind of read through those. Basically, more than half of their assets are in things that are generally regarded as kind of risky. Next slide. So how did they do against their own benchmarks? Well, in 2011, they underperformed in 8 out of 13 categories where they go out and they set a standard with a consultant that they hire to say, this is where we're going to try to make for this particular type of investment. Well, they missed on 8 out of 13 of them. Well, that's 1 year, so maybe it's not really fair to judge their performance over just 1 year. Let's look at 3 years. Well, they underperformed in 4 out of 11. The other thing to note is, last year they had 13 investment categories. This year they have 11. And 3 years ago they had 11. And 5 years ago they had 10. And 10 years ago they only had 5 categories. So what are they doing? Well, they're getting into more and more different types of investments, trying to get a higher yield, because they can see that the liabilities are going up. What the promises that the county's made that they're going to pay people is just growing exponentially. And they don't have the money to pay for it. So they're trying to chase yield and taking more risk. And then when it doesn't work, where do they get the money? The taxpayers. They just come to you guys and say, you're going to pay more. So who's looking out for the taxpayers? Nobody's looking out for you guys. And that's the problem, because you talk to people in Washington, and I went down last year to a meeting that Vicki Tribbett, and thank you, by the way, she was in charge of the group that looked at pensions and that monitored pensions and made decisions, looked at bills and made recommendations out to the rest of the legislature. And she thought the pension system was fine. So I'm glad you guys got rid of it. That's the good news. The bad news is there's a guy named Bob Orr who's probably going to be taking over that committee. He thinks the pensions are fine too. So we've got some work to do at the state level. Is it fixable? That's the question. Yeah, it's fixable if you've got the will to do it. And so what are people doing? Well, the states that are listed up here, the blue ones, those are blue states run by Democrats. All the black ones, those were blue states too. But they got smart and they elected at least Republican governors. And the Republican governors are starting to make fixes in some of those states. Failure to act can have a real negative effect. There have actually been a number of cities and counties across the country that have filed bankruptcy, which is extraordinarily rare. I've been in finance for 25 years, and probably the last time that you had this many folks file bankruptcy was the mid-'80s. It's very unusual. Costa Mesa laid off 43% of their employees because they couldn't afford their pensions. Stockton laid off 25% of their employees, and guess what happened? The unions bought the house next to the city manager's office and started round-the-clock, 24-hour disturbances to try to pressure him and harass him and his family into laying off the pensions. And it worked. The guy actually put forward a package where they did some real slight amendments, but one of the features of it was that the unions covenanted to sell that property to somebody who was going to stop harassing them. Unbelievable that was why he came. And the unions actually have a playbook for how they're going to do this. There's a attorney for a law firm that they use. They actually publish a brochure. It used to be on their website for how to intimidate and harass people who come after pensions. The Illinois governor, just a couple of months ago in November, launched a program to try and raise awareness of the need for pension reform. He did that because Standard & Poor's downgraded Illinois state debt because of the pension problems. Unfortunately, last week, under union pressure, he caved and said, well, we're not going to do anything about pensions in Illinois. Michigan, since 1997, has had a defined contribution plan. Michigan. And yet we in Texas, between Perry and Strauss and the rest of that group, can't work up any enthusiasm for this. And remember, this is just one plan that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the county employee plan. And the county employee plan is in fairly good shape compared to some of the others. There's a separate plan called PERS for state employees. There's a separate plan for teachers, which I want to kind of leave out of the equation. And there's a lot of other plans that are in worse shape than this one is. Wisconsin saved $1 billion last year after Scott Walker put through his changes. Utah has converted their state system to defined contribution for all employees. That's very important. Remember I said at the beginning that you'll get a lot of emotional pushback saying, we can't change these things. And even the people that I talk to that want to change, they say, now you're not going to do anything about the employees who are already in the plan, right? Everything that they've earned up to now, you're not going to try to touch that, right? Well, not necessarily. Because you can change it for all employees, and some states have done that. In San Diego, which has a Republican mayor, and San Jose, which has a Democrat mayor, they put ballot initiatives, or pension initiatives on the ballot last summer. Both of them passed to make changes for all employees. San Diego passed it with a 66% vote. You know how much San Jose got? It's more liberal city. 70%. So people want this. They're starting to understand that this is a critical issue at the local level. Rhode Island did the same thing. They changed it for all employees. That's a very blue state, and it was a Democrat treasurer that put together the plan that did it. You can see some of those other things. But it's the crowding out issue that is causing people to realize that if you don't change this and you can't raise taxes, then you're going to start losing other services. So what should we be doing? At a minimum, you guys can call the county judge, whose name is Glenn Whitney. I didn't know who the Tarrant County judge was. And ask him to make these kind of changes. There's 4 county commissioners in every county, I don't know whose yours are, but call them up, tell them that this is something that they need to do. And they have the power at the county level to change these things. They can eliminate the COLA, they can drop the match from 200% back to 100%, and they can drop the match on the front end from 7% down to 4%. 7% is the highest you can do, and that's what Tarrant County's been doing for years. 200% is the highest you can do, and that's what Tarrant County's been doing for years. So those are the changes that you can make at a local level. At the state level, there's two things we need to do. We need to support compliance with GASB and make that part of the law that anybody who manages a pension has to actually do their accounting in a way that complies with the rules. That way we'll start to get a real view of what's going on in pensions. The other thing is we should try to convert these things from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. Having the employees actually own their own money and be responsible for their own investments is really the right thing to do. It's fair, it's equitable, it's the same kind of thing that we all have if we're fortunate enough to even have a pension. 20% of Americans in the private sector don't even have a pension. But guess what? Public employees do. They have an extremely rich plan. If you want to talk about fairness, I would say that's where the fairness conversation should begin. Skip that next page. What happens if we don't act? Northwestern in Chicago did a study that said taxes are going to have to go up by $1,400 per year per person for the next 30 years to cover all pension obligations in the country that have been promised. And obviously, that's not just the county. That's everything. Social Security on that. But that's how big a problem the pension issue is. So, what are you prepared to do? Are you going to do something about this, or are you not? You have a choice. You can do nothing, and your property taxes are going to start going up every year. Do you guys think your property taxes are high enough now? Do you want them to go high? Are you going to do something about this? Okay. Then make this your number one issue with your state rep and your state senator. Interesting conversation. I was telling somebody earlier. I live in Dallas, and I was hosting my Tea Party group in my little neighborhood. I had a coffee on a Saturday morning, and my state rep came. He and I were talking. And I said, how do you decide how you're going to vote on a bill? I said, you just kind of do whatever you think is best? And he said, yeah. I read it. I do what I think is the right thing to do. That's what if the people that live in your district don't agree with you? Then what do you do? He said, well, if I have 15 or 20 messages, calls into my office, letters, etc., that tell me not to vote that way or tell me to vote a different way, I'll vote a different way. Do you guys have any idea how powerful that makes you? 15 or 20 people in a state rep's office, a state rep's district is all it takes to get them to vote the way you want them to vote. I encourage you to get those cards that are pre-stamped, that are available here, and send them in. Talk to your people. Call them up. Call your state rep. You're really a lot more powerful than you think you are. If any of you are interested in this, I'm happy to take questions. Just go to the next slide. There's all kinds of reading. Some of the sorts of things that I have. Susan Combs, who is the treasurer for the state, did a study on pensions about a month ago and put that up on the website. That you can see here, Texas Transparency, Your Money, very nice little study. She doesn't really delve into some of the more complex issues. It's a little bit of a, here's what the pension systems say they're doing. But it's at least a good starting point. So, quickly, I think, because we probably need to move on, we're 2 minutes longer, but if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Yes?